investment, and this is a great strategy to get started. So I wanted to do kind of a little case study and show you what I did here. So this is a duplex that I purchased in Shawnee, Kansas. Purchased it for $250,000, and this is what's commonly referred to as house hacking. So I basically bought this duplex, had a great tenant on one side who was renting for about $12.50 a month. The other side had, they're kind of like borderline hoarders. The place was trashed. I was able to get a really good deal on it though, because other duplexes in this area were selling for north of $300. So I got this for $250, and got the tenant kicked out. I moved into it. This one actually rehabbed mostly myself, so it's about $20,000 to get that unit rehabbed. So now my mortgage is $1,600 a month, and I'm getting $1,250 from the other side. So not including maintenance and stuff, I basically have $327 a month is what my living expenses are. Whereas if I was actually renting a duplex like this before for $1,250, so my living expenses just went from $1,250 to $327. So I can take all that extra money that I'm now saving and use that to go buy more investments. So I lived in that for about a year. Then I pulled after 12 months, I pulled a $30,000 HELOC on it. So I can actually get a home equity line of credit for up to 100% of the value of the home. So I recouped my entire down payment plus all of my rehab costs. So I now have $0 into this property. Moved out, rented out the other side, and now I make about $600 a month in passive income after everything, off of that one property. Plus I got somebody else paying off my debt. So I'm getting, you figure a loan pay down, depreciation, cash flow, that one duplex is making about $10,000 a year. So we talked earlier about kind of like the slow way to financial freedom. This is what Matt and I do, so this is kind of like the rocket fuel version of it. So we talked a little bit about, we mentioned the BRRRR strategy. So what that strategy is, it's basically it's the same as basically flipping a house. So we're going to buy a distressed rental property, we're going to fix it up and rehab it, and then we're going to rent it out, and then we're going to refinance it. So I'm going to run you through quickly the numbers on like one of our typical deals. So we bought a house for about $30,000, we put somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000 into the rehab. The beauty is now we're all into it for what, $50,000, $60,000. Do math. Yeah, 50. I can't do math right now. But it's worth about 80, right? So it's just like flipping a house. So I could sell that and get that $20,000 in equity, but instead of selling it, we just refinance it, and we can get an 80% loan-to-value loan on that. So basically, what that does is it pays off our original short-term loan. We have a house that we own with $0 into it. We have 20% equity, and we're making $200 a month cash flow, net cash flow with $0 out of our pocket, and all that money back in our pockets to be able to do it again. So that's basically what we do. We also flip. So the BRRRR strategy is great when it's perfectly executed, but the reality is that it's really hard to find deals that are good enough to get all of your money back. So it's not uncommon for us to get stuck with $5 grand if we do a bad job, maybe even 10 grand in a property. Still, less than it would be a 20% down payment. So flipping is like our way of bringing in extra income. So basically what we did is we got the BRRRR strategy, but we're not doing this one house at a time. We're doing 5, 6 or more houses at a time. And we're also flipping at the same time. And the great thing is when you build, so all the systems that you build to be able to buy a distressed home, rehab it, it's the exact same systems that you can use for flipping. So you can take those systems that you put in place, you can sell the property and make some quick cash, or you can refinance it and keep it as a buy and hold. So we're just basically constantly looking at what's our cash flow look like right now, what are all the expenses we have coming up, what kind of reserves do we need, and that makes our decision, do we need to focus on flipping, or do we need to focus on the BRRRR strategy. And by doing that, that's how we, and I've been investing for less than 3 years, and I have 90 rental units, right? So that's basically how we did it. We just scaled that. We took that model and we just used a bunch of business strategies and just scaled the crap out of it. So that is our strategy, and this is our very first house that we did together.
Yeah, this is in Grandview. It was pretty bad shape. It was okay. I mean, it was a distressed home. So when we got a hold of it, we started doing rehab and demo. Those photos over there are close to the finished product of what it looked like, and it's been in it ever since. It's a good cash flow, and we did the burst strategy on that one as well. So it's basically what we do with all the properties. You know, we do some standards that are in every property. We try to do tile on the floor, which is going to hold up to tenant abuse. You know, we try to put even granite now as more of our standard. It's very rare that we don't put granite in our countertops and all of our rentals, just because it brings the value, the appraised value of the refinanced value of that house up enough to where we can get as much equity out of it as possible. But what we also find with our rehabs is that we can push a higher market rent and get higher rents every single month. So that helps on our cash flow, but it also helps on our equity position when we refinance. So, you know, we are always looking at what the rehab costs are going to be on each one of our properties, and then figuring out what's the priority in the rehab and what should we put in or what shouldn't we put in. And it's always a decision. So that, you know, my favorite answer is it always depends on the house that is going to determine how much money you put into your rehab and what you put into it. But we do have a lot of standards because we talk about systems and processes. So, you know, through all of these rehabs that we do, we have been able to identify what are some repeatable processes or things that come up in every single rehab that we do, and we've built systems and processes around those, so it's very simple to just do it over and over again, even without us being involved whatsoever. We just push it out to our team, and they take care of those issues for us. Yep.
So this house, I think we're all into it for about $55,000, and it's currently rented for $925. So pretty solid. We actually did really well on our first one. We've actually done worse since then. So.
It's his fault.
We're supposed to get better as we go on. So yeah, it's a good house. So conclusion is, yes, it's possible. No, it's not easy, but it's absolutely worth it. So you guys see I tell Matt all the time. So you see the late night infomercials, and they try to sell you on, you know, this is easy. This is all you got to do. Just buy this book, do these things, and you'll be a millionaire. It's not going to happen. You know, it takes a lot of effort, and the effort is very much front-loaded for sure. So, you know, in the beginning when you're trying to figure out how to do all this stuff, it's really tough. You have to spend a lot of time in your education, and you know, before you have that network of people, it's really hard to find deals. You know, you're trying to figure out who the wholesalers are and get in good with them. Of course, they would rather give a deal to an experienced person. So, like, in the beginning, it is very tough. You just kind of have to slog through it. You're going to make mistakes. You just have to accept that. You know, we talked a little bit about the worst thing that could happen. So for reference, on a $60,000 house, your mortgage payment is $350 a month. So like, if you screwed up absolutely everything, didn't have insurance, burnt to the ground, $350 a month. Just do it because you're going to learn so much, you know, getting through that process. So that would be my recommendation. So I think that is pretty much it. So we're going to take some time for questions. You guys have any?
Yeah, Q&A time. Ace.
Partnership. What's your guys' strategy on that or recommendation on?
So the great thing about us is I'm a full-time W-2 employee. That allows us to get the loans. Matt is a full-time real estate investor. He has the time to go meet with the contractors and do all that stuff. So when you get a full-time employee mixed with a full-time investor, it's like the perfect pairing. So if you have two W-2 employees, neither one of them can go, you know, like Matt has the flexibility in the schedule to where if he needs to go, you know, check out a deal or, you know, things like that. But, you know, a partnership is kind of like a marriage. So you got to make sure that, you know, you do your due diligence when you're setting things up. Like Matt and I sat down, we wrote down all the roles and responsibilities and made it into our operating agreement. We had like a DUR and, you know, all that. So you definitely
How did you guys meet?
How did we meet?
Bigger Pockets.
Bigger Pockets.
Yeah. Does everybody know what Bigger Pockets is? Anybody that doesn't know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's how we
definitely check it
met.
out.
Glad to meet up. But I think to piggyback on that is knowing your strengths and your weaknesses is very important, because then you need to find someone who has strengths where you have weaknesses, and vice versa, right? So you got to find that right partner, not just anybody's work.
Sure.
Which method do you find that you find the most that you use to find the properties?
To find what?
How do you find the properties?
Probably 70% come from wholesalers. We do our own. We have done some of our own direct mail marketing for leads. We get a few MLS deals. I'd say that's probably less than 10%. So I'd say about 70% are from wholesalers. And you know, now that we kind of have the track record and the visibility and all these relationships, we literally bought a house the other day that our attorney sent us this lead and we ended up buying the house. So like, as you get, in the beginning it's tough, but like I say, once you kind of get some momentum, it gets a lot easier to find because people bring them to you.
I think the more you network and the more you tell people what you're doing or what you're looking for, you know, getting clear on where are you looking for properties, what type of properties are they, and then you start spreading that word, telling people that if you buy that stuff, when they find it, they're going to call you. So the more you do, the more deal flow you get. Any questions?
Would you recommend like a live-in renovation for getting started in real estate investing?
Absolutely.
Didn't you do that?
Yeah, I did a live-in house pack flip, yeah. Yeah.
You know, really it's about just how can I do it, right? And getting over that, well, man, you know, it's going to suck because I may not have a kitchen for a couple of weeks and I gotta have a hot pad over here so I can cook my food. But ultimately, what's your goal in the end, right? It's overcoming, getting out of your comfort zone, and then just doing whatever it takes. Getting over it.
I tell everybody there's always one limiting resource. So it's deals, money, and then like the contractors and the resources to actually do it. And there's always going to be one of those three that's limiting you. In the beginning, it's probably going to be money. And then, you know, it's like, you just got to figure out how to make it work in the beginning. So, you know, how do I, it doesn't necessarily have to be your money either. So like there's different ways, you know, there's tons of different ways of financing things. Yeah, you need to be careful. You definitely need to have lots of reserves. You know, you don't want to get over leveraged. And I could talk about that a lot. You know, definitely educate yourself, read a couple books, but there's a lot of different ways to get started without a whole lot of cash.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I just want to thank you guys for putting this on. You guys always bring a lot of value. I've seen, Ian, you put out a video where you said to maybe not focus so much on educational debt, and I've taken that into consideration. What's your guys' thought on consumer debt? Right now, I've got about 10K each on both fronts, consumer debt and educational. And I've taken your advice on the educational and kind of tailored that back, and it's really helped me grow my down payment reserves and my other reserves. But what's your guys' stance on consumer debt and just, you know, how far I can kick that, you know, down?
So you really have to look at, so it's really, when you actually boil it down, it's really a pretty simple math equation, right? So it's what returns can I make from my investments? What interest am I paying on my debt? So a lot of people are, you know, there's like this psychological, emotional thing that we have with debt. Most people do. It's like debt's bad, it's horrible, terrible thing. But you know, the reality is if you have student loans at 7% interest, if you are a savvy real estate investor, you ought to be making at least 30% on your money. If not, if you're doing the burst strategy, you're literally making infinity returns on your money, right? So it really depends on, if you take that money, what are you doing with it? So if you take that money and use it to pay down the debt, and you're not doing anything else, if it's just sitting there, then pay down your debt. But if you have the ability to take that money and go make more returns on it than what you would make from the interest on your payments, then you're better off investing it. I think a lot of people have a hard time, and it's a hard one for people to grasp.
That scares a lot of people.
Or like paying down your house. Why would you pay down your house at 3% interest? I could never borrow money at 3% interest, right? I would pull that, so like, I could talk about financing all day long, but like, if you have equity in your house, that is a great way to get started. You'll pull a home equity line of credit, you know, now you have a big chunk of money that you can go put towards investing. You know, that's just money sitting there that could be, you know, even if you pull that money out of your house and invested in something making 10%, you're still, you know, net gain versus, you know, leaving it in your house.
When you guys talk about doing the burr method, towards the end there you were talking about doing some higher end finishes like granite, nicer tile. Do you ever look at down the road the cost of that versus when it's time to resell? Like that stuff might go out of style, you spend more money up front on it.
Yeah.
Do you not care if it's so far down the road?
Well, we care. We try, you know, we look at it, but we don't have a crystal ball of what the future's going to hold, right? So we have to kind of look at it in the sense of that design that we're going to put in there, or those colors are going to be fairly new. Hopefully those are going to be around 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And we know that when let's say 10 years from now, even if we had the same tenant in that place for 10 years, we're gonna have to paint those walls again, right? We're gonna have to change stuff out. But hopefully that granite color that we picked is gonna be good in 20, 30 years, right? And I think one of the things that's really important is you always have to keep in mind, I'm not going to live there, right? Like, it's a rental property, right? So it's still granite, right? But it's gonna hold up. It's gonna stand the test of time over 20, 30 years, even if the color may be out of style or some other surface comes in, right, that you might put in for countertops. So you really don't know what the future's gonna hold, but you kind of have to say this thing's gonna be good for at least 10, 15 years before I have to change that.
And you see higher value in the refinance portion of that right up front, because you're gonna get more value for the house.
It depends on what you do with.
Yeah.
So, is adding an additional bedroom going to give you a higher appraised value than granite countertops? Yes. So it just depends on what the house is. I don't think there's a silver bullet answer really, but every house is.
And you will find that appraisals, there is as much an art as it is a science. So you can have the same, we've had $20,000 differences in appraisals sometimes, or more, actually, we've had more.
Okay, so when investing in real estate for like passive income, would you recommend single family or multifamily when it comes to investing? Or does it all depend on the situation?
Absolutely depends. So we were talking with somebody earlier about Grant Cardone. He says never buy single family homes, but it really depends on your market. So like obviously there's some benefit to owning a large apartment building because you got a shared roof, shared siding. It's easier to manage and things like that. But the reality is in our market right now, this guy can probably talk more than me, the cap rates are really low right now on multifamily units. So like you're gonna be lucky to buy with 7, what's the market right now, 7? 7. So I can go buy a $60,000 house in Ruskin and get a 12 cap. So it really just kind of depends. But on the other hand, with a large building, there's some creative finance things you can do too to get that return. So there's pros and cons to each for sure. My 5 to 10 year goal is to own nothing but large multifamily, but for me, the fastest way to get there is to continue investing in single family as well. So I do both.
I think another piggyback answer to that is how much capital you have on the table first. Buying a $60,000 home all in is a lot different than buying $600,000 all in apartment complex, right? So capital, I think you're going to bring to the table.
And so Matt back there is a pretty big apartment investor, so like you do like value add apartment investing, right? So you might buy it at 7, but when you're done, maybe you're at I don't know, what's your best deal?
You probably don't want to know.
Some ungodly number.
I paid $10 for my 14 months.
Yeah, let's talk to them.
Mace, do you have something?
Yeah, other than partnering, what's another way to scale up your business?
To scale, systems. Have a system, delegate as much stuff as you possibly can, whether that be so we use a stay-at-home mom, but there's virtual assistants so you can have do things. There's a lot of, figure out what is the highest use of your time. So like, for me, the most high-value tasks that I do are analyzing a deal, strategy. For Matt, it's making sure the contractors are doing what they're doing. So there's all these different tasks that have to happen. Figure out what the high-value ones are. Figure out which ones can be delegated, and then like a contractor, for instance. Like in the beginning, it's really hard. Like we have a couple of our contractors now where they know exactly what we want. We're really clear with our expectations. Literally, it's get a bid, sign them up, and check on them a couple times and stuff. All right, so like the key is building those systems into your business needs.
Yeah, that's leverage, right?
Yeah, leveraging other people.
You buy a house, you're only bringing 10 to 20% to the table, and you're leveraging the other 80%, right? So leverage is huge. Other people's time, other people's expertise, other people's money. I'd say that's the biggest piece. Yes, sir.
Could you guys talk about like a bad deal that you bought and at what point you realized it was a bad deal?
Which one? Inherited tenants, those are always fun because you never know what you're going to get. We had a That was $5,000. We had a house that you wouldn't turn the water on and started bubbling up through the yard. That was $3,000. Had a house that went to flush the toilet and didn't go down. There's a tree root running through the stuff is going to happen. So it's not that reserve / contingency money. That's real money that you're going to spend. So figure out what it needs to be. I'd say from our original, here's what the bid the contractor gave us to what we actually end up spending is probably, I'd say somewhere between $2,000 and $5,000 over usually.
Yeah, but you gotta keep in mind, that doesn't necessarily make it a bad deal. It just makes it a not as good deal
Not as good.
as what we thought it was. Because when we run the deal analysis on all these numbers, we're plugging in worst case scenario stuff, right? So when you get a rehab back from a contractor, you put a line item in there for contingency.
Yeah.
That's the oh shit stuff that you don't plan for, but it's gonna happen during a rehab. It's just part of the business, right? But if you plan accordingly on the front end, you know that those things are gonna hit you somewhere through that process, and it's still a functional deal.
But knock on wood, we have not lost money on it. So if you're doing your due diligence, you understand you have contingency, how much reserves I need to have. You're doing a good job of analyzing. You can have quite a bit of stuff go wrong and still, the beauty of buying a hold is if you wait long enough, you're going to come out ahead, right? So even if you're negative cash flow, chances are you're still paying that debt down and getting appreciation faster than your negative cash flow. So buy and hold, you can think up for a lot of mistakes with buy and hold real estate.
We won't talk about taxes, but that's a whole nother
And
subject
you can write it
that
all off. Yeah.
helps you. Your wealth portfolio definitely helps. So talk to you soon.
So that is actually a huge thing that we didn't even talk about. The reality is with buy and hold real estate, so you're making, let's say you're making $200 a month net cash flow. You can depreciate that property, offset any on-paper gains. So you pay, if you do it right, you can pretty much pay zero taxes on your income. But then the even better thing is, I can take that equity. So if I do a cash out refi on that property, it's debt. It's not income, it's debt. The government doesn't tax debt. So I can actually pull that equity out. So I can strip the equity, say every 5-10 years, pull that equity back out, completely tax-free money. I know Trump was getting a lot of hot water for not paying any taxes. That's a big part of the way that he's able to do it, and a lot of smart real estate investors pay close to zero tax. So $100,000 in passive income is probably equivalent to $120,000 in W2.
We can talk about taxes at all. We are at.
I have a question back here.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wonder what's your strategy as far as how long you're holding the house that you renovated, or is it in 5 years you look to sell it, 10 years, or just forever? Just keep pulling out money.
There's a lot of, we talk about strategy all the time. So we will probably try to hold on to ours. It also depends on what the market does. So I think Matt and I, our long-term goal is we want to have the passive income coming in with as little work as possible. So if in 10 years, the market goes down a little bit, or we have enough equity that we can leverage into some bigger apartments, we'll probably sell off some of our portfolio in chunks and go buy some larger apartment buildings so that we can, get a little bit more of that, efficiency from owning large multis. So it's just a function of what happens in the next 5 to 10 years, really.
Just depends. Depends on what the market does, and where we want to be,
And the deals that we come across.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, so when you're analyzing the deal, what type of calculations do you do? I've heard of multiple ways of analyzing a property. Like some people take ARV times 0.70, or do you? You said that you recommended the bigger pockets analyzer.
So that all goes back to what is your criteria. So for us, the properties that we buy now are all so similar that I can literally look at a deal and say, yes, it's good, no, it's bad, and I know what the cash flow is going to be without even running it. But in the beginning, you have to figure out what your criteria is. So like the $100 a door, you want to make sure you have enough contingency on there that you're not going to have negative cash flow. So like for me, $100 a door, I will not go below that because I want to make sure I got plenty of margin on my cash flow. Remember what that part of your question was?
So
how do you analyze it?
Yeah.
So there's the 70% rule, the 1% rule, there's a 50% expenses rule, but the reality is you need to actually plug in everything
Yeah.
onto the calculator, learn your area, learn your market, because they're rules of thumb, so they don't work in every situation. You know, it's highly dependent on the type of property. It's like the property taxes on my duplex is like $5 grand a year, where the property taxes on our houses are probably $800 a year. So like, there's a lot of things that vary there. So you really need to learn your market and figure out the numbers over there for sure.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, you guys said nowadays you have a lot of your deals that you get from wholesaling. Whenever you were first starting out, what would you say were the majority back then? Obviously, the wholesalers wouldn't be companies then.
Yeah, wholesalers, but I will tell you, before I hired a coach, I was like everybody else. I was like, well, you got to go to the MLS, right? That's where I went. But I got my first property, sat on the market for over a year. I got it for $38,000 off the MLS. There's a 3-bed, 2-bath, or 1 bath, and a 2-car garage attached in Raytown. Well, had a lot of foundational issues, I'll tell you that. But that was my first property. I learned a lot on it, but I got it through MLS. I got my second, I got my third one through MLS, and then I started getting educated on wholesalers and making those connections. Once I made those connections, they started funneling deals my way based off my criteria. So that's really, wholesalers are your best friends.
Here's another little tip. So a wholesaler makes their money when you close the deal. So their greatest risk is, I got this new guy, I don't really know if he's serious. You know, what if he backs out? That wholesaler they might have a $10,000 wholesale fee on that property. So they're risking $10,000 by going to somebody new. They're going to come to Matt and I because they know that we'll close on it, right? So maybe put up a little bit more EMD, or offer to put up a larger deposit, put some of that risk back on you. That'll help you in the beginning, to build that track record.
And before you start working with wholesalers or putting stuff under contract, or even utilizing their time, make sure you got all your ducks in a row to go ahead and close, so that you're not getting involved in the deal when it's in escrow and then you got to back out because of what happened.
Yeah, definitely get a pre-approval letter, even if they don't ask for it. Send it to them so that way they know that you're legit.
Yeah, it's somewhat of a small circle we all
really
work
is.
in
It
real
really
estate
is.
investing circle. So don't start off on the back foot. Matt?
Just on that, make sure your wholesaler knows how to do an ARV. I am absolutely amazed at wholesalers in Kansas City and the ARVs that they market. Do not believe a wholesaler's ARV, whatever you do, I don't care, call realtor, get it, that they're usually way off.
Does everybody know what ARV is? It's the after repair value. So what is this property going to be worth after I get done with my rehab and have the appraiser come out? Well, a wholesaler wants to sell houses, right? That's his job. A car salesman wants to sell cars. That's his job. So they're going to tell you it may be worth more, or maybe they think it's going to be worth more, but you need to do your own due diligence to make sure that that repair value after it's rehab is what they're saying it's going to be. Because the next number they're going to tell you is how much the rehab's going to cost. Just need some paint, a couple $1,000 here and there, you'll be good.
Paint carpet.
Paint carpet, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Every time.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. Any other questions, comments?
So if you don't know any wholesalers, how do you go about networking and meeting them?
The Mid-America Real Estate Investors Group is a good one.
Facebook, there's a Kansas City Real Estate Investor Facebook page. There's deals on there all the time.
Bigger Pockets.
Meetup.
Yeah, Meetup. It's another good one.
That was one thing we did in mind. Yeah, because we wanted for ourselves.
But you guys can talk to us too. We're available if you guys ever need anything or have questions. Just feel free to give us a call. We're on Facebook, Bigger Pockets. We're going to share our contact information up here, so take a photo of it if you want and give us a shout.
Our marketing's kind of all over the place because we got all these different companies.
All right. What other questions or comments? Is that it?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. We got one more.
Do you avoid certain types of neighborhoods, like low income or high crime neighborhoods, or you just make it higher vacancy rates?
We do.
Okay.
A lot of people don't, but you have to establish what you're comfortable with, right? We just find that that doesn't fit our criteria of what we want to do. So we just establish where is our target market and where is not.
So I have pretty much everybody's email here from, I know you guys signed up on the Eventbrite thing, so I'll send out a thing to where we can put you on a list and we can email you some stuff. There's a great article by Ben Leibovich on Bigger Pockets where he talked about why you can't make money on a $30,000 house. So you get below a certain point, you don't have enough gross rental income coming in to actually cover all of your maintenance and expenses. So like a roof, there is a usable life for a roof. There's a usable life for driveway, for windows, all those big things. And they have kind of a fixed cost. So whether it's a $3,000 or $300,000 house in Overland Park or a $60,000 house, the roof is still going to be somewhere in that $5-8 grand range. The furnace is still going to be somewhere between $3,000 and $6,000. So there's kind of a fixed cost. So if you're renting a house and you're only renting it for $500 a month, there is not enough gross income coming in to cover both the mortgage plus all those long-term expenses. And over time, you think you're making money in the beginning, and over time it'll just eat your lunch. So like that's why we have that $800 a month minimum on rent. So. Anything else?
Feel free to ask questions if you got them.
All right, bar's open again. Appreciate all you guys coming. Nice to meet you. Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, we do study. 2 Fridays ago.
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
It takes a lot more time.
Okay, so you did say earlier that you were on the big podcast.
Yeah.
Which episode was that?
37. Thanks for coming. Thank you. I'm going to get there. Yeah.